We're doing this. It's
All right,
on.
It's for real.
It's for real now. So we need the clapper thing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So see, I already. That's a great way to start the episode. Welcome to Just the Bass Player. This is our brand new podcast show thing. I'm Lubianiker, and with me is.
My name's Jacob Umansky.
We're here to just shoot the shit about bass playing, about our lives, about just about anything that we find interesting and compelling. We like to think that we'll be able to kind of bridge the gap between maybe some more classical concepts of bass playing and the more modern outliers, let's call it, and the forefront of bass. Yeah, we can jump right into a segment we call Show Me Something Cool. How about you take it away, Jacob, and show me something cool?
All right, man. I'll do my best. So here's a little pattern I wrote over this progression of 7th chords. So the progression is pretty, nothing too crazy. And you had the right hand, and we go. So, yes, it's pretty.
Oh my God!
It's pretty cool, man. It's one of those things where it sounds a lot more challenging than it is. All I'm doing is, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just let me kind of try and break it down. What I'm noticing is that you have like a double sequence. So your right hand at least goes like one time, strums the chords. I would call it like slower.
Yes.
It's not slow, but it's slower. And then the second time is kind of a faster articulation of the same sequence, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
But
so
how about you take me through it?
Exactly. So it's just, I think if you were to do one cycle of it, so right, so that altogether is like a very quick group of 9. So the first one
3, 4, 5.
is like 1, 2. It's just 5. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you double up the first half. And then the rest is just still 16th. So it's like, I think that's what it is. So it's like, so what I'm doing is I'm slapping, hammering on, slap, pop, pop, right? And you double it up for the second one. And that's how you get that kind of, that almost double bass kind of sounding thing.
Yeah.
Right, and what's cool is that if you want to add more to the grouping, if you want to do like double thumbing, you can add like. You know.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
so
yeah.
The strings keeping is driving me nuts. Like the way you can kind of 4 strings down, you can kind of double thumb immediately. Like a single 16th note later, you're already like strumming a completely different string. That drives me insane because my technique is so different than that. So with your how did you come up with those chord voicings and like is it stuff that opened up for you when you started playing 6-string basses, or is it something you've always been into?
I mean, the rest of everything aside from the last thing I just played was all 5-string, and all it is just root, position, major, minor, and dominant 7 chords.
Yeah.
Right. So just E flat to D minor, E flat, F dominant 7. Right, and then you get this G minor to G flat, going a little out there. Back to just resolving back to E flat. Yeah, exactly. It's something we do quite a bit in the prog world.
Yeah.
And resolve back to 1.
It's one of those things where when students ask why, it's like because it's right there.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, literally. That's one of those
just
things.
Moving one finger backwards.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I have a lot of. You get, and I'm sure you do the same, where you get a lot of questions where from students or people who listen to your music, where how do you apply that? Like, how do you like would you apply theory to that? Like, how do you know to do that? And it's like, yeah, I've learned my theory, but I just know that this is right here and it just sounds pretty. That's it.
Well, That's a huge secret that I don't like to have that air of mystery around a lot of the things that people perform on instruments, but because basically, most of these kind of instruments are organized in sort of a logical way. So that means that you can map out patterns and then you can research around the patterns. So if you think about it, it's like creating tension and release is all about identifying what makes a pattern, breaking it, and going back to it. So if you can, like, even geometrically, mathematically find those things on a fretboard, then that's theory, basically.
Right.
It doesn't mean you don't have to actually like eat your vegetables and learn the modes and chords and stuff like that. But it does mean that a lot of the interesting harmonies and best parts about music are just right there, in your fingers. And people have the tendency to say, well, you have to learn a bunch of things in order to start playing chords on bass, for instance. You have to know like how to break everything apart. No, you just have to have like a very experimental mind and think like, well, if I can play a note and a triad 1 octave higher, which is something very common, then you can kind of say, well, what happens if I add this finger? What happens if I add this one? This one? Like every single note you would add to that triad would create something, a sort of a voice.
Sure.
And that's kind of, I think, the best way to also learn how to navigate chord voicings on bass, because it's so tricky.
Yeah,
it's so tricky to not sound muddy.
The way you're describing it and explaining it is a lot less scary than a lot, like, when someone says just learn theory, it's a much more
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's because I was like my learning process, we'll get to it later, but my learning process was very weird, and it took a long while for me to kind of admit like, hey, here's a bunch of stuff that I don't know and I'm afraid to learn. And then I had to sugarcoat for myself. I had to learn how to sugarcoat like some of the things, and I've always found it very difficult to learn if it's not out of necessity, and that's why. And once I looked at the bass and I said, well, I need this knowledge because it actually applies today. It applies to stuff that's happening on the fretboard. Then it kind of unlocked my mind. But at first, I was just saying like, I don't need to know these things. I just need to kind of find what I like. But both are true in a sense. So you can get stuck in that place where I know what I like and I know how to experiment and I'm good. I don't need to know what it's called. But once you do know what it's called, it's really easy to say what else, and it kind of builds this hunger.
Sure.
Because you're kind of solidifying the information. There's something beautiful with that.
Absolutely.
I went into sort of...
That's all. No, dude, that was great. The last thing I'll say is with this exercise, you can take, and then if you have a 6 like me, or even if you play this on another fret, since we're doing this double pop, that microsecond of time gives you, for me, enough time to go and add my thumb to add this little double thumb in there. So if you're doing, so a lot of this stuff is basically, from my philosophy is like, when I'm learning something like this or writing something like this, I'm just thinking like, what isn't utilized or what isn't being utilized in this little millisecond of time, or how can I, a lot of it is just me looking at my hands while I'm playing this and thinking, okay, how can I move here without, with keeping this chord intact or something like that. So a lot of it is just what's not being utilized. But that's my show me something cool for episode 1. So I believe it's your turn to show me something cool.
All right.
Oh God.
I'll do this one. So many like bad jokes floating. It's your turn to show me something cool. And it's like, don't take your pants off. Don't take your pants off. Yeah. And that's actually, that wouldn't be cool. That wouldn't be cool,
man.
But yeah. Sorry about that.
Wrong podcast.
This one should go to my OnlyFans.
Only fanned.
Oh my god, that's genius. Only fan, man. That's how we need to change the name.
I don't
of the
think
podcast.
I don't know. So I said that in a comment, and it got like, this was like a year ago. It got like a jillion likes, and then and again, like, I can't take credit for it because I don't know if I was the first person to say it. But then, like, the next day, this giant guitar company made an OnlyFans post, and I'm like, bro, like, come on. Like,
That sucks.
but I don't know. It was a little sus. But that company is also known for doing sus stuff. So I don't know. Whatever. Either way.
Well, I'll Google that later just to find out who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I say we take it back and we call this podcast OnlyFans. And but if not, I think, well, there's one thing we kind of skipped over, and
well,
maybe we can
do your show me something cool, and then I'll talk about the name. It's all good.
So this is my show me something cool.
What? Dude, that was out of control.
Dude, I'm actually nervous. That's so weird. I'm just playing for you in a Zoom call. So yeah, it's something I've been working on for a long while now. It's a combination of a lot of techniques, but basically it relates to something you said, which is filling in the gaps, or just listening in for where there's room and just filling everything. And the interesting story behind most techniques I develop, but this one is no exception, is the fact that I don't actually like hear bass music when I think about that stuff. So I hear like an entire ensemble with a percussion player and a guitar player and a pianist, and it's almost like a Latin ensemble what I'm playing, like in my mind.
It definitely comes across that way. Like there's definitely so much going on.
Exactly, because I'm actually thinking like there's a bass player that does this, and there's like a guitar player that goes like another line, and then there's like a sort of a cymbal thing that goes. It's almost like a noise. It's not even a melody.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole percussive part, which is the hammer-ons from nothing and all the dead notes here on this hand. So just playing through it slower one more time. There's also like, thank you. And there's also a matter of kind of messing up with the timing. There's almost like a liquid timing for the first part for this part. I don't know if you noticed.
No, I noticed it kind of settles in once you get into like the main groove, but the first part's kind of, I wouldn't call it like rubato, but maybe
it's a little bit that. Yeah. I have a time frame in which those artifacts can happen. In a lot of music from like Middle East and Turkey and places where rhythm is kind of played in a more of a circular, fluid feeling, where there's a beginning and an end, but then in the middle there's a lot of room for movement. This is kind of where it comes from, because again, in my mind, that's the kind of ensemble I'm hearing of, like acoustic instruments and even a lot of my chordal slapping stuff. It all comes because I'm hearing music that I can't really articulate on a bass, but the closest thing I can do is stuff like this. So if I break down the technical elements here, there's, as I said, hammer-ons from nothing. There's dead notes being played on my right hand. Hammer-ons from nothing are these things. Maybe I'll need to find a good position for the microphone. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah. So
Jesus.
yeah, and overtones and if I really wanted, to teach somebody this technique, I wouldn't say, "Hey, start with this." I would say something like, "Well, there's basically something very basic that almost anybody can do that knows how to kind of play with the thumb here, and it goes like this." And that's just using the thumb. So if you have control of the thumb and index finger, which most people have, you can do. And then it's just a matter of kind of developing a freedom to move between strings and experiment with these sounds. But this is just sort of a build-up approach. So you can just start with playing a backbeat and then the hammer on from nothing and just shift the bass to wherever you need it to be. It also works with like longer notes. Usually we play short notes because it sounds cool and kind of very articulate, but you can also do something like... There's always something that I get back to, which is like, it's so easy to take something like a bass line and turn it into music. Like you only need to add like a single element, either rhythm or an additional note, and a bass line becomes a composition. And I think that's also something very appealing in these instruments and the way they're played today.
Absolutely.
And it kind of communicates with that. And maybe what I showed here is sort of the end game of that sort of thinking, where you're like, well, I'll add harmony, and then I'll add another line, and then I'll add like a percussion, and then, I imagine it's the same for you, and you'll answer in a second.
Yeah.
You don't actually think about these elements separately. You just think about, like, you conceptualize the music in a sort of abstract way. So you listen to this beautiful developing chord that like the stuff you played.
Sure.
And you just have to like listen to it in your mind's eye, and then it kind of happens. And for me, if I look at my hands like I did before when I showed it to you, I get nervous, I get confused. I'm like, what's going on here? But then if I just think about the music and I kind of take a breath and I let it materialize, it's a whole other thing. It's the freedom you gain from breaking things down to single pieces, and then having also the entire concept of what it's supposed to sound like. And I've always been like, I guess that's kind of my gift in a sense, that everybody has talents, but my talent wouldn't be anything specific other than being very methodical. Like, I really know myself well in terms of how I understand things. So if I have this big musical goal in mind, like that, so yeah, I have for me it's like, okay, well, like a month from now I'll be able to do it, you know what I mean? So it's just a matter of understanding the cycles that I go through. I have to learn each motion. I see people like yourself and like Tosin and all these innovators of the techniques. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't be able to do exactly that, but here are the things that I'm interested in. Here is how to work at them. Here is, first, everything I do like without any sense of time at first. I like, even what I showed before, I played it to a backbeat, but at first I would just go do silly things like just try to make the sound.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like there's a sound and that's like the first thing I want to nail. It's like, okay, the sound is like a bass note followed by a bunch of like percussion.
Yeah. A lot of these things you can kind of like the thing I showed you, for example, the last thing I figured out was what time signature it was in. I just liked the idea of doing that pattern. Like, okay, this is cool. This is a cool thing. And then when it came time to explain it, I'm like, oh, I guess I should probably figure out what exactly is going on here. So it's not even, so it's one of the last thing that for me that comes to.
Yeah, there's that Animals as Leaders tune, Joy of Motion, it's called.
Yeah.
What's it called? Yeah. So every time I see that title, I'm like, well, that kind of describes my feeling about playing bass. It's like finding joy in motion, finding something that makes you, like when you play it, it kind of makes you happy. It makes you, it, you know, gives you this uplifted feeling of something interesting is happening. And I always equate it more to dance than anything else. You know, not that I'm a dancer, nor would I want to show, maybe on our OnlyFans, but again, but I wouldn't. It's not from that part, but it's from the part that I think like all of these things, and even playing, it's a matter of. Let's put it this way: when I teach slapping, I first of all like teach what parts are moving in your hand. Like, it's funny because a lot of people are like, well, I just like watch people do it, and then I develop an intuition to how to move. But then there's like, for me, I actually feel where the power is generated and what makes it accurate and all that. And it's like we talked about in theory. You can go so far with intuition, but once you really understand the mechanics in terms of movement, you can develop, I think, the really intricate flow that delivers, like that brings out things like you're playing and I'm playing.
Sure.
It's kind of, it also gives it a sort of more poetic approach than just saying sit in the shed and you know,
right,
go like this forever.
Yeah, it's a bit more appealing.
Yeah. So this is my Show Me Something Cool, and it's a bunch of it always takes me through this kind of road because it's really difficult to talk about a single point in your playing without saying, well, this led to that, and, you know, kind of following.
Right, of course. And it's not just it's not just a singular bass line that you're playing. There's so much going on. You can't just, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's I'm hoping like in 3 to 5 years to produce a single minute of music that's worth listening to this, and I would consider that a massive success and get like 20,000 views somewhere.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
That's the goal, man. Yeah. Those 20,000.
Yeah. So that brings me to our next segment, which would kind of close the episode for us, but it's a major one. Thinking since we're launching this thing, and of course we're both, I would say, known to some extent in the bass world. But it's on rare occasions that you actually get a chance to really get to know somebody that you've been listening to for a while. And I've been following your work for quite some time. And of course, you have been following mine because I'm incredible.
Took the words right out of my mouth, dude.
I hope I'm not painting myself as an asshole. I'm just kidding, guys. So I was thinking like we can each kind of describe, like, why do you play like this? I mean, maybe the segment should be called "What Went Wrong."
What went wrong?
That made you like turn, like, instead of take the turn into your run-of-the-mill like gigging workhorse guy,
sure,
and then say, "Oh, I'm gonna take this instrument and, you know, try and push it as far as I can." So, what's the road you took?
I mean, so I'll go pretty far, but as far back as I can, and then I'll kind of do a little bit of a fast forward. But the reason I started playing bass was I was like 6 or 7 years old, and I had this fascination with Gene Simmons of Kiss, and I just thought he looked I thought he looked badass, and I asked my dad to buy me a bass, or buy me a guitar. So he bought me an acoustic guitar, and then within like 2 months, I learned that Gene Simmons was a bass player, and I told my dad, buy me a bass. He's like, I just bought you a guitar. Take like a year of guitar lessons, and I'll maybe buy you a bass. So after like 6 months of taking guitar lessons, I wore him down. He got me a bass. And so after I started taking lessons, one of my favorite Kiss songs was a song called God of Thunder, and the riff is like, you know, right? And that's awesome. But when I got the sheet music books, I learned that he wasn't doing that. Gene Simmons was just doing right? And I thought, that's great. Like, he's doing what the bass player should be doing. But I wanted to do, you know, more. So, but, you know, as I progressed, I got into bands like Pantera, Avenged Sevenfold, and a lot of like pick players. And so it was like Johnny Christ, Rex Brown, and those were the guys, Mike Dirnt from Green Day.
So you started out playing like mostly pick?
No. So So I would learn those songs and try to play with a pick. And my dad, who was paying for my bass lessons at the time, would be like, "I hear you using a pick." He would shout, and he would shout from the bottom of the stairs, "Stop using a pick." So I learned to like play all those riffs with this, sound that wasn't like, but
right,
with that more aggressive sound to get my dad to, to get my dad to leave me alone. And before I knew it, I kind of had this sound. Meanwhile, I'm also taking lessons with this guy named Mike Frost for like 10 years, and he was showing me Jocko and, Richard Bona and all these amazing jazz bass players that I, absorbed so much from. And then, but around this time, I was like 17 or 18. I was pretty good. A lot of the bands I was listening to had moved to little kind of... I got into Dream Theater for a second, and then I got into the more heavy stuff, like Between the Buried and Me, and I got really into Dan Briggs, and that was the first time where I saw, putting, how the, you play aside, but bassline composition from that standpoint, and how this was the first time I saw a metal bass player, not just doubling the guitar riff, but he was weaving in and out of what the guitar was doing and playing these super awesome contrapuntal bass lines over not just chord progressions, but actual riffs. And I thought that was insane. So I got really into that. And then I went to Berkeley and I studied with Anthony Vitti, who is like a killin' slap bass guy. And I showed up, playing, right? And then I saw him playing, and he was like, and I'm like, how do I do that? And he's like, we need to redo your whole technique, because I was doing so at 18, I just got to Berkeley, and I thought I was hot shit, and I just like,
you were hot shit.
Ego checked just, and so I did my whole slap technique and learning stuff from him, from then on I got super interested in the slap stuff and applying that to metal, because that's this sound, it's super close to that, like, so that led me to getting into, applying the slap stuff. And obviously I got into Victor Wooten and all that stuff. But, so it kind of... Game. Sorry?
I'm saying Legends of the Game. It's like the people that you have to go through to...
Right. Yeah. And, while I was at Berkeley, I got to study with guys like, Victor Bailey before he passed away. So learning stuff like, going back to like the stuff that Dan Briggs played with all those contrapuntal bass lines, like learning how to like walk and have like a linear approach to composing bass lines like that, not always starting on the one, all this really cool composition stuff I got from a lot of jazz guys. But then I as I went through the school and kind of started going off on my own, I discovered guys like, like Evan Brewer, and right. I saw your stuff. I saw a lot of stuff that you were doing, probably some of the first Dingwall videos, and just with the Marcus stuff, it was interesting because a lot of it is, he's doing a lot of the melodic playing, like, right, but it wasn't that, there wasn't that like crazy metal influence that I was going for. So seeing,
but he does. Sorry, just to break you up for 1 second. Marcus does have the like heavy hitting rock energy.
Oh, 100%.
So that's something that really communicated with me as well, as like a rock and metal guy originally. That as soon as I saw him play, I was like, this guy beats the shit
like
out
when
of the
you
strings,
when you
man.
hear
It's
that,
like,
when you, it's like, what the hell, dude? Yeah. So I 100% agree. But then I just remember seeing guys like Evan, like you, like Henrik Linder, who took this slap stuff and, it was technical and it was percussive, but it was also musical. So that was the thing. That was the thing that I needed, because I didn't have, for me in my playing, I just felt I had the technique stuff down, right? I could do what I needed to do, but I couldn't write how I wanted to write, and I couldn't say what I wanted to say. And I started learning stuff, from some more of the modern cats, and I think that's kind of what led me to where I am, is just, because you think like I talk to kids who come to interval shows and stuff like that, and they're like, yeah man, I listen to you, I listen to Polyphia, like these are some of my favorite players. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, man, that means literally the world to me. But have you ever listened to Marcus Miller? You ever listen to like a Louis Johnson record? You ever heard like Jocko? And it's sometimes the answer is no, and it kind of like breaks my heart, but it's fine. Younger kids, they grow up with different, but
how old were you when you started liking the classics, like, Larry Graham, or like appreciating these originators?
Yeah.
How old were you?
I think I was probably like 17 or 18.
Oh, okay.
But,
so that's quite young. A lot of people learn to appreciate that stuff later on.
So I got lucky in a sense that I come from like a pretty musical family. Like my dad,
Oh, cool.
None of them are. My dad's not like a professional musician, but he's a drummer, and him and all of his college buddies, who were all like my family friends. I grew up. They were showing me when they found out I wanted to play bass. They would play me Rush. They'd play me The Who. They'd play me Yes was a big one. And just coincidentally, like all those bass players were kind of doing the thing that I like, originated kind of doing the thing that I want to do now, right? They had some of the first guys to have that super punchy, gainy bass tone. Like John Entwistle is probably like the first guy to do the thing that all of us are doing with that parallel bass tone with a clean. He was like one of the first guys to do it, and none of the kids today doing it probably know who he is, which is
yeah. So
but,
some of them do. I mean, I guess people usually
in our scene, I think, like in like the progressive,
maybe yeah.
But
because people think that music started when they were in high school. That's usually the case.
Yeah, that's
usually the case.
That's where I think, and the last thing I'll say is like that's where I think I got lucky, was that I worked with this guy named Mike Frost who was my teacher for like 11 years, and he was the guy who introduced, and the way he structured my lessons, because I studied with him from when I was like 7 to when I was 17, and he started off of my lessons like, okay, cool, I'll teach you Holiday by Green Day, right? But then he'd be like, but the next half of the lesson, or we'll do an hour lesson, 20 minutes of Green Day, and then I'm going to teach you blue bossa. He would teach me jazz, he would teach me theory, but he would like sneak it in.
I'm sorry.
No, man, he was. Yeah, it was great.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had a fantastic teacher, and that's like such a key point in a lot of people. Like most musicians that are as talented and beautiful as yourself have this sort of point in their life where somebody took them and said, well, this guy's talented. If I put in the work with him, he'll make something out of himself. So I'm sure Mike is like stoked out of his mind that you're in the position you're at right now. Are you still in contact with him?
Yeah, I'll see him sometimes at NAMM. The coolest thing that happened was I saw him at NAMM. He was playing at the Gensler amp booth, I think. And it was like right when I got my first Z, not this one, the first one, and I showed it to him like, hey, do you want to meet like Sheldon Dingwall, like the guy who builds my basses? And like he had a whole conversation with Sheldon, and they were just yeah, they were shooting the shit for a while. It was so cool, like having those two worlds meet. But, it was very, very, very cool. He's a really cool guy.
So that's awesome. It also kind of explains so much about yourself. Like watching you, we don't actually know each other that well.
No.
So we've met several times. We've communicated online.
Yeah.
But observing your work for last I don't know, a few years. Time is a mystery to me. I don't know if I don't know if you started 10 years ago or 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
That I became aware of you, but all that throughout that time, I could kind of write that analysis about you, to be honest. Like looking at you. No, seriously, that's why I felt this sort of kinship with you. Ever since we first met, I was like sure that I could strike up a conversation with you and we'll find a lot of common ground.
Absolutely.
Because I hear the rock and metal background. Kiss was threw me off. It was like a surprise for me. I have to say, like we're gonna cut a short that says Jacob Umansky loves Kiss.
The only thing I'll say is we'll do a section where I will tell you the things about Gene's bass playing that I actually do, the things that I've taken away from it, because there's some pretty cool stuff. Like,
no, definitely. I think Kiss in general is like an incredible band, and we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah,
that would probably cost us most of our audience. That would be like you said, they would be like, Kiss who, and also what?
Yeah,
you guys you guys just did. And now you're talking about Kiss.
Exactly.
But there's like a direct, people don't understand, there's a direct lineage and you take with you. So like you said about John Entwistle, like I feel like I'm like continuing down that path that he sort of paved. So looking at you for the last few years, I could really tell that there's a lot of like jazz fusion in your playing, but then it's always sort of there's this rock and metal bubbling underneath, but then the sophistication of prog and jazz and fusion kind of covering it. It's like a layered cake. That's what makes like innovative styles, because everybody needs to have influences, and then the result of how you combine these influences usually ends up being like what's considered your style.
Right.
So when people ask, like when I used to teach how do you develop a personal style, it's something great to write on a teaching ad, but at the end of the day, developing a personal style is basically a series of aware or unaware decisions that you make along your musical path. And then you're saying, I love the way the finger style sounds on this bass player. I love the slapping technique on this one. And I feel like it really resonates with me, what you said. You kind of described this. When I asked you, why do you play like that? Or what went wrong? The answer was like, well, I love this music. And that's a beautiful answer. It's not, you haven't said like for one time, I sat down and practiced this technique. You just said, this is the music I like. These are the people that inspired me and took me under their wing. And then, something like that happened. And I feel like you made my life a lot easier answering this question, because it's very, very similar.
Right. I mean, I think the last thing I'll say, I said the last thing, but so again,
just go ahead. It's your podcast.
I know,
just
man.
talk.
I know, man. It's day one though. I'm nervous.
No, that's all good, man.
Again, the question you get from everyone is, how do you develop your own style? How do you sound like you? How do you get to that point? And I think there's a point where you do. There's a point where you're subconsciously just writing how you write. But when I'm starting off and let's say I learned, Detroit, for example, or right, something like that, and then I want to include something like that in my playing. There's a point when you just start out where you're like, oh man, like I'm just pulling this from Marcus, or I'm just pulling this line from Jocko,
right?
And you just keep doing it until it evolves to the point where you don't even think about like who you took something from, or who you took, or what line you pulled from there, and then it just becomes your own thing. And I think that's how that's the way I it's amalgamation of all these stolen ideas and techniques, and combined with your upbringing. And I think that's
I'm probably sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think that's always my answer to the question, is just I there's so much stuff that I've grew up loving and tried to take away from, and it's just at the point now where and it still happens. The most recent time I think that's happened was when I learned like the selective stuff, and then I'm just thinking like, how do I make this not sound like Tosin? And now there's stuff on the intervals record where it's just like, it's my own iteration of that, right? But it's always just gonna, that's how it always feels for me. It's just I take something from someone, or and evolve it to make it my own, and then it becomes a part of my bag of tricks.
I feel like that's beautifully said, because I'm probably going to butcher this, but I think it's some sort of instructional video from Victor and Anthony Wellington, where they talk about the stages of like consciousness in terms of like learning something. And there's like when you're aware and conscious, and then the last stage is unconscious, not knowing, meaning that it's
exactly.
Yeah, that's the part that hit me the most. I was like, whoa, that's brilliant, because I thought, well, the stuff that it's like your personality. Your personality is, I think, by definition, something that you're unable to control, because all the things that are under your control are like traits that you're able to adjust, maybe. And here, that's the same in your playing. That's why it takes somebody from the outside to point out something and say, hey, we have to change your technique, because you were not aware that you had anything wrong with it.
No.
And I think that also applied to what you just said. It's the fact that there's a point where you're consciously saying, this is cool. And then as time goes by, it gets to a point where like, I don't even remember specifically why this happened or that happened, or why am I playing. Because it evolves to the point of the unconscious not knowing, is the fact that it's somewhere in the back of your mind. You never have to think about that again. Like I'm never worried that I'm going to forget how to play anything, not in terms of like the music itself. I forget all the time actual music, but in terms of technique, I had the time in my life where I was like, wow, if I don't practice this stuff, I'll start being bad at it. And then enough time goes by and you develop this confidence, and you're saying, well, this is as much part of me as my personality, and maybe mechanically I'll have less stamina to play it for longer periods of time, but it's so embedded in what I do that there's no chance that I'll pick up a bass and not know how to go. Like it's something that I hear so clearly and I feel that's so natural. But then again, if you ask me to break it down, like at what point and who I took it from, it would be this long convoluted answer, because like the stuff you just said, it's this moment that I've seen Anthony Jackson playing with his thumb and palm muting, and then another moment where I saw Victor kind of layering rhythms while he was playing, doing stuff like all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's such a bad imitation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you pick all that stuff up, and then years later, you're like, well, I can do this thing now, and that's cool. I'll do like a shortened version.
No, I would like to know, man.
A lot of it.
Where did it all go wrong? Where did it all go wrong for you?
Well, around 10 minutes ago, I've started feeling not so well. No, it's a sort of, it's a similar story. I started understanding that music is cool, I guess, when I was like 10 or 11. Before that, my dad used to buy CDs, and he's like a music freak, and he loves like classic rock and progressive. And he used to sit my brother down and me as a kid, I don't know, and we would like listen to music. And at first I didn't get it. I distinctly remember looking around the room, it's like, we're not doing anything. And my brother started getting it, and my dad was like playing Zeppelin, and we were sitting down and listening to it. And it was this very wholesome experience, and I wanted to get in on the excitement. So that's kind of my introduction to music. Before that, like I was 6 years old playing a Casio keyboard just for fun, and it's funny. I feel like the same 6-year-old kid today, because I really enjoyed the technique part of it. I really enjoyed learning how to move my hands in interesting ways. But then I didn't have any. I wasn't like a musical prodigy kid playing crazy stuff. I was just like, like today, I click a button on the keyboard and then I play a bunch of notes. And if I do the sequence right, it's like a game. But I always like played an instrument, because after that there was like a school band, and I played clarinet, which is. I just did it for fun, and it was also a way to kind of do something at school that didn't suck. And I loved playing in like orchestras. We were a terrible orchestra, I'm sure, as a bunch of 11 or 12-year-olds.
Yeah, but that's still your first, it's not a band, but it's your first time playing, creating something that's not in your bedroom.
Yeah, but I did have a traumatic moment where it was the first time I heard a recording. Somebody like my mom or something brought a camcorder back then. Yeah, camcorder. And then she played back she said, oh, it was so beautiful. And she played back the recording. And even as like a 11-year-old, 12-year-old clarinet player, I listened and I was like, this is so incredibly bad. Well, anyway, I realized I started liking rock and metal because my dad and my brother, they were like, what are you playing clarinet for? And my brother and I were like, we should learn guitar because Metallica plays guitars and stuff like that. Yeah, and then I started taking a bus with my brother, just going to some guy that he knew that taught us guitar for like a couple pennies, really nothing. And he was like, I think it was maybe 3-4 years older than my brother, which at the time seemed like he was an adult. He had a scruffy beard like yourself. And he looked like, this guy gets it. And he was playing Kirk Hammett solos, and we were like grabbing our heads going like, this is insane. He's like a god. The reality of the matter was that we arrived, we would wake him up in the middle of the day, and it would be in his underwear, literally like in his boxers, teaching both of us guitar, like half an hour for me, half an hour for my brother, for the price of a single lesson. Which, if I say the price, it's like, it was like $15, I guess.
Wow.
That. Yeah, because the guy wasn't a guitar teacher. It was like a dude that knows how to play guitar.
Just some guy
at home. Yeah, but the experience was so powerful. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of the origin story. He's in a sense, he's the guy he's the first guy to see me doing something on a guitar and say, hey, you're really good at understanding these things. Like, you're really catching on quick. And I was like, wow. I had no reference. And he was like, let me give you a couple more exercises and see if you can handle them. And everything, I lapped up, everything he gave me was like, I sat down, I was like, I'm going to nail this thing. And I had this feeling of, I guess, this sense of belonging. Like, I found something that I can really sync with. That's I understand the music, because it contains the ability to perform the music that I love. Clarinets can only get you so far as a teenager that loves rock music or metal. And it was a classical guitar that my cousin brought me, and it was all messed up. And I played that thing until it wore out, like literally the frets. It was almost fretless. And then my first electric guitar, which is still right here, is a beat up Ibanez RG series, the 450. So the neck is like paper thin. And it was this guy got rid of his guitar and got a new one.
Oh, sick!
It was beat up. It still has a crack like this big in the neck. I didn't know these things back then. I was like, it's my teacher's guitar, and I didn't have an amp because my parents were like, are you really taking this serious? I don't know if we want to spend money on this. And I didn't have an amp, so I rigged it to my home stereo system with like an instrument cable, and then the tip that makes it
the adapter.
It had a mic, a mic input, the stereo system. So I rigged it so it's only like clean and through the preamp of this really shitty stereo system. And as soon as I played and it managed to make a sound that resembles an electric guitar, I was like hooked beyond belief. I couldn't stop playing. I'm talking about like 7-8 hours a day. Like really, the only thing I cared about. School was, I wasn't a great student, let's put it like that, for most of my life.
That's all I want. Like anytime I would go, I would think, I can't wait to, like when I would go, like it was around high school when I first learned how to, plug into my DAW and like use Logic. I did so shitty in school. All I was thinking about was like, I can't wait to just go home and just plug in and just start writing and working on, whatever nonsense I was tracking at the time. But I was not a good student.
I'm not surprised. A lot of people, that reach a certain level fairly young, there's only so much you can do with your life, because at that age you also have friends and you have a bunch of stuff going on. But what I take from it, I'm now a very I'm starting out as a parent. Like I have a 6-month-year-old, and if there's one thing that I think I'll try and implement is like kids these days, if they find anything that they are so captivated by it that they're able to like focus and spend 6 to 8 hours a day on, just let them do it. Because my parents were kind of on me about a lot of that, so they wanted me to do well in school. It's just a very natural feeling for a parent to say, like, well, the guitar is like extracurricular. It's like this hobby. Like, you need to do stuff that actually makes money. They're also right, but but at the end of the day, like, the main thing, what you can learn a lot about just discipline. Just by having something you're so passionate about. So anyway, I'm gonna jump like the same method you used, like give some information on the background and jump fast forward. Started being really proficient in guitar, loved virtuoso guitar playing. I actually always kid around and say most of my left hand technique I developed by the time I was like 16. So I would play like Yngwie Malmsteen tunes when I was 13 or 14 years old. I would practice them till my fingers bled, and I wouldn't say nail them, but I could actually, it would pass as people that knew his music would say, hey, that's Far Beyond the Sun, or that's whatever.
Arpeggios from Hell.
Yeah. That one gave me a lot of trouble.
Respect.
But anyway, yeah. And Steve Vai and Joe Satriani, all these, I loved guitar players like more than anything. Every time somebody showed me like a guitar player, I would go insane, and Pantera became like my Beatles at the time. Was like, I knew everything, and I still do. And then I got to like, we had a music class in our high school, and I auditioned for it even without my mom knowing. I was playing like 6 months guitar or something like that, and I went and I asked for a check for like whatever it cost, and I went to the school and I auditioned, and I played Every Step You Take by Police, by Sting, and then the second part was a pentatonic blues improvisation, which was basically me saying I'm too lazy to work on something else, and I don't think I'll get the gig anyway. Apparently, the head of the, I don't know what you call, I'm sorry, this is still my second language, when there's like a school and then you have a biology class, physics class, so yeah, the head of the music department.
That's it.
Okay, the head of the music department in my high school was a huge Sting fan. It was like his dream, and as soon as I said that, he lit up because he thought, well, this is a kid, like he's 13 or 14 years old, and he loves Sting. It's like blew his mind. And the other guy was like a jazz improviser, a brilliant teacher, and I kind of struck between like. I obviously I didn't improvise well, but he really dug my confidence that I was just going to improvise for an audition as like somebody that plays guitar for 6 months. You know, it takes some
balls, man.
And yeah, and by the end of I felt like I did terrible, but he actually made a point out of going outside. I was shaking from like the experience. He went outside after the audition, and he went like, if I'm moving my ear, it means you did okay. And I kept looking at him, and he, you know, people can move their ears without touching them.
Yeah.
And he didn't do anything. And then eventually he went like this. And I was like, sick, cool. And I got in, and those were like such an amazing, like 4 years of high school that I basically did any studying. All I cared about was running. Like we had a rehearsal, 2 rehearsal spaces. The music teachers were like a bunch of wild characters. It was like I don't know, it was the worst thing for being a student in high school, but it was the best thing for my social life and for the feeling of accomplishment as somebody who wants to be treated as a serious musician, because I was playing in like 6 ensembles, 7 ensembles every year. When I was a freshman, the seniors took me and said, you're going to play guitar for like the fusion ensemble. And I was like, what? I was not playing bass yet, but you know, and they were excited that I was the only guitar player that knew how to read sheet music, because I had the clarinet background. So they could give me actual music to learn. And the other guitar players had no idea how to, you know, I wasn't really that good at it, but I was persistent enough. So coming out of, during high school, actually, the first time I picked up a bass was like, well, there were like 7 guitar players in my class, and they all started getting really good, and there was like a lot of competition. And I think that kind of atmosphere sort of I didn't do well in that atmosphere. So I felt like the pressure of knowing, like I put a lot of pressure on myself, because I thought, well, if I'm not better than they are, then I'm no good at all or something, right? It's a very young approach.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, there was like a bass player's missing, and I'm guessing this is a story of a lot of people. It's not that unique, but I was like, screw it, I'll give it a try. Like I can sub as a bass player on this. I'll just borrow from my friend and I'll sit in. And then the guy that took me into the head of the department, he was leading the ensemble, and I played, I think it was actually Blue Bossa, or I played this really simple jazz tune, and he took me aside after the class and he said like, that's the exact quote, you probably don't understand what I'm saying, but you have something that bass players work to achieve, and you have it naturally, which is like a sense of time, and you have like a sound on the bass, like you project. I was like, whatever, I'm not even interested. Like I didn't want to do the next sub. I was like, this is just an experiment, and I was bored actually playing bass. I was just like, I was playing it funcally. And I was used to being the guitar player that, chords and then solos.
It's about you.
And I was waiting for, yeah, exactly. It's still about me.
I mean, that's why we play what we play now.
Yeah, sorry to say, but anybody that says differently is lying. So anyway, it progressed to a point where there were so many guitar players that my only chance to get ensembles was to play bass. And I was like, screw it, I just want to play. And then I naturally fell in love with the instrument, and when I became serious, somebody that, he was a student, but like I think 3 years or 4 years ahead of me, he was already graduated. The head of the department was like, well, you're interested in all that virtuoso stuff, there's this guy. And he was like, everybody was like, oh, that guy. So I went to his place for the first lesson. Again, a guy in underwear going to buy cigarettes, which is, I guess, my music teachers are like that. Yeah. And then I distinctly remember getting into his place, and he was like, well, before we do anything, let me show you what you can do with the bass. Because I was like... Yeah, exactly. That's what I played for him as soon as I walked in. I was like, like you said, I'm the shit. Like I have, I know how to do that sort of stuff, that sort of sound. Yeah. And he was like, well, let me play for a second. And he went like... And he played that sort of stuff, and also the choral stuff. You went like... Yeah. And I sat there like this, and he played for like what felt like 5 minutes, or I don't know if it was 5 hours or 5 minutes. And I sat like this, and I felt like, whatever this is, this kind of voodoo magic that you're doing right now, I have to know all of it. That's what I said. I need you to teach me all of these things. And he laughed, and he really liked my approach. And then this guy for like a year would sit for 3 hours with me for the price of a single lesson. Wow. And he would use it like as a practice session, but he also he took me under his wing to a point where his mom would yell at him, because again, we were kids. Yeah. But she would yell at him, "You're not taking enough money from this guy. You're sitting 4 hours playing with him. He should pay you for 3 lessons." And I was there listening to her. I was like, is she for real? But we would just sit and talk for hours, and he would play me like your guy Mike. Like he would show me all the greatest bass players, and we would talk about what's cool about each one. And he showed me like drummers like Steve Gadd and Dave Weckl, and he turned me from this rock and metal guy that has some sort of approach on the bass into like a bass virtuoso. And he would sit with a metronome and say, "Let's do this exercise for 1 minute." And he would trick me, and we would do it for 10 minutes. And my hand would hurt to a point where I was blistering. And he would sit there and laugh. And I was like, how long was that? He was like flipping the timer, and it said like 10:0 something. I was like, motherfucker.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, but he turned me really, like in a couple of months, people at school were like, what's who did you strike a deal with? Like, what's going on? Yeah. So that's, I guess, like that period of time that I just described, sort of guitar playing, intense guitar playing, going into screw it, I'll pick up a bass here and there, going into this is the most incredible instrument to ever been created. I was so excited. It felt new, you know. This guy was showing me stuff that I was like, what is people know about this? You know what I mean? That's what I felt. I was like, people know that the bass can do that, because I want to be the one to tell them, you know. I want to be like really, that was the feeling I had. I was like, I want to be an ambassador for this shit. I want to go out. That's what I did. I went to school and I started doing like stuff like and I would do this just practicing, and people would kind of gather around, and they were like, what the hell? What is this?
Yeah.
It wasn't stuff that was common where we were at. Like people were playing like
Yep.
Nobody was doing.
Yeah, I remember
I wasn't even doing that, but stuff similar, like the basis of that.
I remember
anyway,
oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I was just to kind of put a ribbon on the origin story, origin story.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's my only fan moment.
That's crazy. I love that, dude.
Yeah. Just to put a ribbon on it, it was what I just said combined with like I was gigging since I was like 16 or 17. When I'm saying gigging, like stuff outside of school and outside of whatever I was doing, like the army, or I always had like bands outside doing things. We were selling tickets as like high schoolers to shows we were putting on, and took everything super serious, and arguing with my parents. They're like, what are you going to do with your life? I'm like, the same thing, but only like better. Yeah. Like I'm playing in bands, so I want to play in big bands, and I'm teaching. I even started teaching music when I was like 17, but I didn't know anything. I was just taking, remember the guy in the underwear? So I became the guy in the underwear, except I had pants at this point.
Take one step at a time. Yeah.
But also, it was like 6 and 7 year olds. You're not supposed to be in underwear next to them, unless they're yours, I guess. But yeah, so gigging and saying yes to every. People were like, "Can you play Latin music?" And I was like, "Of course." And I never touched a note of Latin in my life. And it was like, "Oh my god!" Like copying all the lines. So my arc was, I didn't go to Berkeley or any music school. My arc was mainly made out of gigging and having that necessity all the time to like learn something for a gig, and then getting into it, and then getting too into it, and having it completely take over my playing, and then shifting to something else. I actually like, the funny thing is when I really got back seriously to metal was when I was taking the Marty Friedman gig, which is funny to say. Like it took me until I was like 22. And this is when I think I was 22 when I started playing with Marty. It took me that long. It's not that long, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Practicing for his gig is when I was like, right, playing metal on bass is unbelievably fun and great and rewarding. But before that, I was really deep into all the other stuff I was doing gigging with jazz and fusion, and we were playing coffee places, and I felt so sophisticated taking like 10-minute bass solos, and probably people in the audience were like, enough of this bass solo. But I didn't care. I was like, never mind. I won't even my bass didn't want to hear that. I was like experimenting. It was my time to kind of. I think everybody needs a time where they feel like they can play really well, and they just want to show it all the time. They just want to, and it's important when I see people like that. There's cynicism, and you can say, this guy is just overplaying all the time. But it's sad if it's like a really mature musician, let's say. But if you see a kid really going at it, just like let him go. Let him
talk, man.
Exactly. There was one time I was teaching a class in Israel, in Rimon, and it was a bunch of young guys, like 15, and this one kid was really shredding, and he said, my dream is to become like a bass player, like a Hadrian Ferro, like a jazz bass player. And there was this other teacher from the school sitting in on my class, I guess like watching me teach. And he said, whoa. You don't know what you're saying right now. It takes so much dedication and blah, 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 and you can't call yourself a jazz bass player yet. You're still young. I'm like, I was sitting there going like, oh, this isn't the place for me if this guy is teaching here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
If
I
you're
was feeling
throwing
like-
Kant around that early before he even, that's crazy.
Yo, it's a 15-year-old saying like, I'm a jazz bass player and I want to be the best jazz bass player in the world, like these cats. And you're like saying, pouring cold water on him, saying like, don't jump so ahead. You don't know jazz yet. You don't. I was like, oh man, that's terrible. So my approach was like, not only are you like a jazz bass player just for wanting to be one, and you're like, that's part of your identity as a musician right now, but I do believe that you can be the greatest one ever. Like, that's cool. You're 15, you have the right approach, just like, you know, that's kind of my idea. So I had that phase in my life where I was like, my head was exploding with ideas, and that's also like the crucial time where I developed a lot of my, let's call it like the technique you've seen in the videos.
Sure.
So that period of time where I was like playing 10-minute bass solos in coffee places in wherever, that's when it started. I was starting with Bass the World videos and doing bass demos, and I felt like, you know, I'll just try. Actually, my first video ever was produced by my wife and girlfriend at the time, which is interesting. Like she knew how to record before I did. She had Cubase and a sound card, and she was an amateur musician. And she recorded, it's still online, it's called Pocket Full of Beans. I had no idea, it was just a random nonsense name. And it was just me showing stuff I've been working on. And I just watched it not long ago. And for me, it kind of sucks because, well, whatever, it's like very basic stuff, but it's funny. It's actually 3 segments. In each one, you can hear stuff that ended up, that I still do. But just like the baby steps of that. So, yeah, I guess that's. I haven't even gotten into the whole part of my career because I guess you haven't either.
Yeah, we could do that. We could definitely do that either. We got plenty of time. It's only episode 1, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'll wrap it up here, but just by saying like, it's I guess like my self definition is quite similar to yours. I would also describe it as like there's a lot of rock and metal bubbling underneath, like a layer of sophistication that I put on top, in terms of all the different bands that I've played at and all the, let's call it you'd have a tough time finding somebody that played such extremes, let's call it, in terms of genres. So from accompanying Noah, which she's like one of the most incredible singers in the world, but it's a gig that has a lot of moments where that sound like this, like for as long as she can hold a note, you know, and just being this sort of background layer, and also like playing a bass solo here and there, but mostly like supporting, playing Italian music, like and music in you know, Spanish and just world music, let's call it, to playing like extreme instrumental metal with Marty Friedman, to playing whatever. It's like this sort of convoluted, like, I'm happy that all this stuff happened to me, because I guess like it put me in sort of a singular position, at least in my eyes, to kind of have possibly a unique interpretation of, you know, playing bass and all that, bringing the intensity of rock and metal to just like every genre that I got to play. So hopefully this wasn't too long or boring, but I really had a fun time. It's kind of like those open-ended parts are always kind of like therapy, because you're like kind of thinking about things like, yeah, well, wow, I really missed that guy. I should give him a call. You know what I mean? Like the first teacher that showed me this stuff, Ron Kaufman. I haven't talked to him for like a year. Yeah. And he's like one of the best people that I know. He's a tremendous bass player, and it kind of strikes me. I'm kind of saddened by it right now. I should really give him a call. It's really
like I one of the guys I owe a lot to is that guy Anthony Vitti, who was the guy who told me I needed to redo my whole approach to slap. And I taught at this like Victor Wooten camp at Berkeley over the summer. And he was one of the instructors there, and I hadn't seen him since I graduated, but he's always been like, you know, liking my stuff on Facebook. He follows me on Instagram, and he's always, you know, it was cool because he showed me the pocket stuff. Like, he showed me the, you know, what I needed to get to where I needed to go, but all the double thumbing stuff, all the, you know, all that kind of nonsense stuff. Like, if I can't do this, right, I can't do any of the stuff I just played. And so he was kind of like my foundation, and just seeing him, he gave me like a big hug. He's like, man, the stuff you're doing right now is so killing, like, and all this other stuff. And I was like, man, I would not be doing it if it wasn't for this. So for you, so it's cool catching up with people like that. And it's 10 out of 10.
Also,
recommend.
like, you can't overstate the importance of these cats in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know who you have to be to not say I'm where I'm at because of these people.
Yeah.
Right. There's only like maybe 1 or 2 musicians in my life that I've met that said I wasn't influenced by anyone. Like, I'm an originator of this and that. And usually it's an answer that makes you feel like, oh man, this guy.
Yeah, I don't want to hear you talk anymore. Yeah.
I think like every person that I can name that helped me along the way, from the head of the music department that used to stay after his hours, nobody was paying him, and show me stuff on bass just because he believed in what I do, to Ron Kaufman, the guy that told me, let me show you what the bass can do.
Right.
These guys, they had no idea what they were doing at the moment. They didn't know they actually put my life on this track, leading me to the moment of talking with you.
We get lucky, man. Like with all of these people that you've come across in just as a kid. Like I got. Did you ever have like something like School of Rock when you were in high school, where it was like it's like an after school program where the parents pay and they put you with a bunch of musicians and you like have all these little bands? So
yeah, my music department was
okay. That's awesome. We didn't have that at my school, but there was like these programs that you could sign up for and you pay for. And my dad, he was like, look, man, if you do better in school, I'll sign you up for it. But like, you gotta pass your math tests, dude. And he was fair. That was fair. And I shit on all of it. I did so bad. And so what I did was I went on, this was when I was 14 and 15. I went on Craigslist and I found a band. There was like these 20-year-olds in Amityville, the town over. And my dad drove me to this rehearsal space and I auditioned as a 16-year-old and they were all like 20s. And that's how, I was, 14 or 15, and I started playing with these guys and gigging and staying out on the weeknights until like midnight or 2 a.m, just rehearsing, playing. But it's I got lucky with that, and the fact that the dean of my high school, like, I used to get in trouble sometimes, and I did some not nice things or said some not nice things to a teacher who called me out for whatever. Either way, I did not handle a situation well. My teacher's like,
thank you for leaving out the most interesting part of this story.
No, basically, so I had a Spanish teacher, and I'll just say it. I had a Spanish teacher, and this girl behind me asked me what page we were on, and I was like, we're on page 47. And she's like, thanks. And my teacher goes, Jacob, like, don't talk in my class. And I'm like, Miss, I'm not gonna say her name, but
don't do things that I have to bleep out later. I don't have the energy for that.
Right. And she's like, Jacob, don't talk back to me. I'm like, I was just telling her what page we're on. She goes, you talk back one more time, you're going to the dean. I'm like, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. And she's like, what did you say? I'm like, this is bullshit. And then she sent me to the dean, and my dean was a bass player. And he's like, Jake, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? And then he's like, I got to give you in-school suspension for this. And then he just kept me in his office for like another 15 minutes. He's like, so what do you do? So what do you do in music? I'm like, well, I have a Music Man Stingray that I have on order that my parents got me, which is that one right there. And he goes, oh, really? And he pulled out his Stingray, and it was so cool. And then like the next day, my jazz teacher in my jazz band teacher was my supervisor for in-school suspension. So it was like, I got lucky. I was surrounded. I got lucky.
Can you show your first bass? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Let me. You got this guy.
I think you'll do that, and then we might want to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So even though it's fun,
this isn't my first bass, but it's my first good bass. It's a Music Man Stingray double buck, maple neck.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
man.
Trans red finish. I got it from.
I can see the frets. The frets are like.
Oh yeah, dude! Look at that.
Terrible condition.
This is clean. This is like clean compared. I haven't cleaned it in forever, but like, yeah, it's rough. It still sounds badass though.
I'll show you mine. This is my first good bass. My mom got it for me when I was like 17.
Is that a Tobias
18
design?
It's actually a Gibson Tobias, but it's the Tobias Basic.
Yeah.
You know what? I have to. It's set up really funny. I made it passive because the Bartolini preamp crapped out. It just went dead. So it's passive. It's like volume, volume, tone, tone. And then there's a series button that kind of disconnects everything and just goes both pickups direct to jack. It's this huge warm tone. It has flat wounds on it. I just want to play it for you for a second.
Yeah, go.
It's like, in terms of tone, it's like the anti-Dingwall. But
Yeah.
so it has this really muffled tone. It's almost like a vintage sounding bass.
Yeah, it sounds like
but then,
very Jocko.
But also it has this kind of punchy, articulate sound, which usually isn't common in these kind of instruments. And then this is the magic switch that just turns off all the knobs, and it's just pickups to jack, and it sounds like this.
Dude, killing.
Yeah, it's tons of mojo, but to be honest, I might just for fun just have, because I rarely use this kind of sound, so I end up rarely playing this bass.
Yeah, it's
like a fun.
It's so hard, man, when you have, like, I have that thing sitting there, and I miss it so much, but I never use it for anything anymore. It sounds crazy. Hold on. Sorry.
Yeah. You have to do the same right now.
Yeah. Battery still.
If it's not in tune, it's even better.
Yeah.
Oh God. There we go. Woo.
Yeah, she's
such a classic tone, man.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's really nice. You know, and the first thing I wanted, you know, like just doing the rage.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I got it for.
Is that how you actually play that riff?
I think so.
With the open A?
Yeah, you listen to the record, he's using the open A for sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I've been playing it wrong for years.
Yeah, it's that but my favorite sound from the Stingray was kind of like, it's not even your typical like Music Man one.
Wow. Is that just neck pickup?
No, it's I think it's, I don't know what setting this one is. It's the one right before Justin. That's just.
So it's probably a coil, one coil from each or something like that.
Yeah, which is kind of close to the Dingwall thing. So it's the same thing with the back.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, this one, and then the same thing for the back. Yeah, it's fucking. Oh, whoops! It's real sick.
I think we should.
We got to do a bass tour episode.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I got quite a few of them behind me. I guess there's like in this room spread out all over. There's something like 10.
Yeah,
I guess 10 or 11 basses.
I'll grab some from my folks' place. I have like all the ones I was playing before Dingwall. So we'll have to organize that.
Yeah, that's a sick idea for maybe even the next episode.
Yeah.
But I guess like we can wrap it up here.
Absolutely,
and, So first of all, like it's been a blast. I mean, I knew it would be fun, but I had no idea. Like I feel like we could do a couple more hours just.
That's
talking,
the thing,
like,
man. It's like anytime me and you would do a Zoom hang or just like, catch up, it'd be like, it could go on forever. So I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yeah, but it's gonna take some practice to try and end conversations.
Yeah.
That's the main issue. It's so much fun to just shoot the shit. So yeah, I guess this is so preliminary, but we can take like questions and suggestions and stuff like that, and just if you just want to write to us, it would be on JustTheBassPlayer@gmail.
Yes,
I guess. Let's do JustTheBassPlayerPod. Maybe.
Yeah, JustTheBassPlayerPod at Gmail, and we can.
Awesome.
We should also do like we should also make the Instagram too.
Right. So yeah, look us up, JustTheBassPlayer on Instagram, with possibly the acronym JTBP. Well, it's good that we settled on all these things like right now as we're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
But definitely like JustTheBassPlayerPod@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And definitely on Instagram, JustTheBassPlayer. And we'll cut clips from this long ass conversation, and we'll also be happy to see you guys playing and kind of give our take on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just about anything you want to hear us talk about or play, or if you have questions about technique, those are the addresses, I guess, for now. And hopefully this was fun for you guys as much as it was for us. And the only thing that we didn't do is explain the name. Ah,
yes. Should I do that? It
Please,
doesn't really take
just
it.
do it now.
It's a very quick explanation. But,
Yeah.
It just comes from that. There's that stigma that comes from being a bass player when you just hear like, he's just the bass player. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that much. He's not he's. It doesn't really show up prepared. Who cares? He's just the bass player or whatever. So, I've heard, and there's a lot of negative stereotypes that come with being a bass player, which a lot of the times couldn't be farther from the truth. Some are, but most aren't. And I just, for the longest time, like years, I thought of like, it would be a really cool name for a podcast to have Just the Bass Player podcast. And
yeah. I agree. It's super cool. It's funny because it's been a while since you explained it to me. Mm-hmm. And during that time, in my mind, the meaning changed. I invented an entirely a similar but different meaning. Yeah, for me, for some reason, I remembered that it was like when you talk to some guy and you're saying, "Dude, have you seen him? He plays it for that band." And your friend is like, "Really?" And then he plays bass for them. And then your friend goes like, oh, he's just the bass player.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. It's exactly
like he's not the singer. He's not, I guess it's a similar meaning, but that's the way I describe it.
100%. Like that's exactly right.
Your friend throwing a bucket of ice water on you just for saying to somebody, he's famous. Oh, he's just a bass player.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So
I love that.
That is Just the Bass Player podcast for you.
All right. It's been awesome, man. I guess I'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. So long, everybody.